Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever you are. It is my pleasure and great privilege to have this interview today with Professor Frits Berends from the Netherlands. I am Abderrahman Nimeri from Charlotte, North Carolina. I chair the IFSO Communication Committee. And we are excited because our next monthly journal club is going to be in a new format. It's not only going to be on Facebook, but we also are going to have it on a webinar format. We have the privilege of hosting the senior author of the Elegance trial. It's a randomized controlled trial from the Netherlands, the Professor Frits Berends. And I want him to first introduce himself, introduce his group, and tell us what was the rationale behind doing the study. You guys can see the visual abstract in front of you.
Thank you, Abderrahman. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor. As said, I'm a surgeon from the Netherlands. We started doing bariatric surgery somewhat 20 years ago. All laparoscopically, bends in the beginning, obviously, and later on gastric bypass. Now, I guess nowadays 80% of bariatric procedures done in the Nordic countries and in the Netherlands, especially, is gastric bypass, Roux-en-Y gastric bypass surgery. Talk about this specific study. At the time that we came up with the idea, it was around 2010. It seems like a short period ago, but at the time, there was not so much discussion on new procedures, on bile acids. And it was also always a bit puzzling to me. We're doing at the time already about 1,000 procedures a year in our hospital, and I always was puzzled by the fact that this basic gastric bypass design didn't change from the origin on, from the time that Mason and Ito introduced it in the 60s. The major change in the basic concept was done by Griffin in the 70s by adding the Roux-en-Y concept. And the question always was, did they get it right the first time, or could anything be improved about a gastric bypass design? And we started thinking with our research group about gripping points to improve gastric bypass surgery. And it's not a very complicated design, as you recognize. Speaking of that, you could think of 3 major improvements that are possibly could be made. So we came up with 3 randomized controlled trials, one focusing on pouch length, which is still on the way, one on maybe weight regain by adding, by preventing that through adding a band, sort of a phobic concept, and finally the limb length issue. At the time, there were studies and randomized controlled trials, but always focusing on elementary limb length. And although 10 years seems like a very short period away, at the time, nobody was thinking about BP limb length. It was all about a sort of a mechanical idea about elementary limb length and so on. So that was, sorry, yeah?
Sorry to interrupt, go ahead, please.
So that was the basic idea that led us to do a randomized controlled trial that was designed as a sort of a quick and dirty study to know what the role of a biliopancreatic limb really attributed to outcomes. And the original design was meant to focus especially on this proof of concept, not necessarily finding the ideal length for BP limb, but just to prove how making a BP limb longer could add to outcome. And we had a running period, a primary endpoint aimed at 2 years, because we're not looking for a very long running study. After having reached 2 years and finding that the outcomes were very, very advantageous for a BP, for a longer BP limb, then we decided to let the trial run longer for a period of 4 years, and it's now reaching 5 years, and that's where the final article was based on.
Great. First of all, I would like to congratulate you and your group for adding a significant impact to the literature by doing the holy grail of studies, randomized controlled trials. These are not easy studies to do. You make it sound very easy, but this is a great achievement. So I have two quick questions, and I don't want to give out a lot of the journal club itself or your presentation. You have a very elegant style of presenting that I've seen before at IFSO, and I really look forward on the 28th of January to see your presentation. But I have two quick questions. So all over the world, Roux-en-Y gastric bypass is going away. So in the US in 2017, only 18% of surgeries done was Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. Worldwide, there is a sleeve gastrectomy supremacy. What is it in the Nordic countries that still maintains Roux-en-Y gastric bypass as the predominant procedure? Can you tell us something you know that we just don't know?
I really can't, because there's not a right answer, and I'm sure that I must be I'm on slippery ground here. I trust that in the Nordic countries, at least let me speak for our own situation, we very much lean on evidence-based medicine, and the rapid increase in sleeve gastrectomies, not only to me but to many, is somewhat concerning. So the new kid on the block obviously is the one anastomosis gastric bypass, which runs a sort of a similar, makes a similar journey. And I've always been, as a doctor, been very careful about adapting to new procedures that don't have a track record like a gastric bypass had. As you recognize, as I mentioned, gastric bypass has a history of more than 50 years. We know what outcomes are. We know what oncological risks are in the long run. And that cannot be said for some of the other procedures. Now, you mentioned